Welcome to Saturday Morning Retrospective. Ladies and gentlemen, hello there. Welcome to another episode of Saturday Morning Retrospective with your hosts, Adam Ronan and Gordy. Hello there.
Hey, folks.
Happy Saturday.
Yeah, happy Saturday to you.
We got our imaginary bowls of cereal.
Is there imaginary cereal?
What's that remind you of?
The Room, man.
The Room. Yeah, so we've done a couple episodes of this show. We did a brief overview of G.I. Joe for our debut episode. Then we did Thundercats. So if you are new to the show, this is your first episode. We always take a retrospective look at a toy line and a cartoon from either the 80s or 90s and break it down, share some memories from our childhood, and just kind of geek out on stuff that we enjoy, which is mostly stuff from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
So like I said, our last episode, we did Thundercats. For this third episode, we are doing... What are we doing, Gordy?
I will tell you what we're doing. Mm-hmm. We are doing M.A.S.K, where the illusion is the ultimate weapon.
That's a cool thing, is they always had like these really cheesy yet beautiful taglines for things.
They did.
So... M.A.S.K was a cartoon and a toy line that debuted in 1985 from Kenner. Now, the main premise of the show revolved around the fight between an underground task force called M.A.S.K. And Gordy, do you know what M.A.S.K stands for?
Yes, it stands for Mobile Armored Strike Command.
Command? But how do you spell M.A.S.K with a C? You don't. You spell it with a K. Command with a K. And if you know me at all, I'm totally fine with spelling words with
Yes, he is. Yeah, it's a fact.
Yep. So M.A.S.K is, of course, in true 80s fashion, fighting against the villainous or criminal organization called Venom, which stands for, Gordy?
Vicious Evil Network of Mayhem.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, we have our protagonist and antagonist. M.A.S.K is led by Matt Tracker, and Venom is led by the vicious, the evil Colonel Sanders. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Miles Mayhem. Who I think is like real, if we could be real, like D-list Cobra Commander.
D-list. Like he's kind of chunky. And
he's chunky. Looks like he just wants to give you fried chicken.
Yeah.
All his mission in the world is to just swoop down and steal all the fried chicken from the world and give it to his criminal organization.
Yes.
For like a job well done. You stole the meteorite. Job well done, villains. Here's some fried chicken. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So that's there. And of course, before we get into stuff, if you guys ever have ideas for future episodes, stuff that you want to see us cover on this particular show or any of our podcasts, because we do have a few of them across a few different channels, you can, of course, get us on Twitters at AdamRonan_XXIV or at BossBattleGordy. Or, of course, you can get in there and chat on our Patreon page at patreon.com/R24. We will always take paid donations to cover shows that you want to see. So that's just something for you to know. And something that we are toying with that I think we might implement in the next couple of weeks is a Patreon exclusive commentary on the things that we are talking about in this show. So like, for example, right today we're talking about M.A.S.K. So we would do it a Patreon exclusive Gordy and I commentary over the first episode of M.A.S.K, which I think would be fun, that you could only get on Patreon, or at least a timed exclusive where it would be there for a few weeks. So that's something that we're pondering. If you are interested in that, get at us. We would love to discuss that notion with you. Let's get into the meat and potatoes. Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes, let me ask you this. Now, we loved Thundercats. We had a huge attachment to G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
Where in your psyche of nostalgia do you sit with M.A.S.K?
M.A.S.K. I have a different relationship with the cartoon than I did with the toys. So cartoon, it's not up there.
Yeah,
but
you saw toys, it, but you don't have a lot of memories.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of memories. I know I watched it, or at least some of it. There was a good run of it, but the toys were pretty cool. For boys in the 80s, and still, we love cars, some more than others. And these were freaking transforming cars.
I'm glad you said that word, transforming. You and your beard. I think that M.A.S.K was the gateway drug to Transformers in a way, because you had these vehicles that, with spring-loaded articulations, transformed into a different vehicle, which was like very easy with like the flip of a switch or a press of a button. They did these cool transforming things that could because Transformers, I believe, also came out in 1985. If you were just getting into it, you could be like, oh my God, this is really cool. And then someone on your playground could be like, well, you think that's cool? Check out Transformers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like a really cool, and I think that's kind of what M.A.S.K was for me a little bit. Although, if I could admit, I liked M.A.S.K a bit more than I liked Transformers. And I actually like GoBots a whole lot more than I like Transformers. But
Odd man out.
Yeah, that's true, very much so. But we were watching the commercials and we were watching the show, and I was like, this is a real precursor to getting into Transformers, I feel like, for kids, and might have been. So the cartoon, we'll kind of just start here. Of course, obviously, the M.A.S.K versus Venom, after it launched in 1985 and spawned a variety of product, including had a TV show that launched strictly from 1985 to 1986 and had 75 episodes. And it also had a toy line that actually spanned a little bit longer that ran all the way to 1988 and had 4 different series within and waves in that toy line.
That's impressive. The 80s was a cutthroat time for toys.
It's totally. And also, and we mentioned this with Thundercats, I think, in the last episode, but it blows my mind how essentially M.A.S.K had one season and 75 episodes in the season. When you think like now in 2018 with seasons like on Netflix, you get like 10 episodes a season. Game of Thrones, 10 episodes a season. Sitcoms, you get 22 to 24 episodes a season, like Simpsons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But back then, with these childlike cartoons, with He-Man and Thundercats and all these shows, they had like 60, 70 episodes a season. It was fucking crazy for the animators, I suspect, which is probably why they cut a lot of corners with like 3-frame explosions. And speaking of the animators, so the cartoon was produced by French-American Deke. I remember Deke very well. They had a Deke, and a bunch of other companies had their hands in almost all of our memories. I feel like. So Deke and Kenner Products teamed up to bring us the M.A.S.K cartoon. And of course, the series was based on the M.A.S.K action figures. Now, one thing that's fun to know a little bit of history about this time, like 1985, 1986, is there was a huge movement by parents to demonize these cartoons. It was like a lot of stuff against them because parents saw these cartoons as just commercials to sell toys, masked, no pun intended, as entertainment. So these were cartoons that were just basically just 22-minute long commercials to sell toys to us impressionable children. And this was one of the things that parents definitely campaigned against. They're like, you're just trying to sell my kids toys. Now, in watching, we were watching Toy Galaxy, and Dan Larson, a big fan of him. He always makes a lot of points I like. And one thing that he brought up when I was watching his M.A.S.K thing, just to kind of do some research on what other people were saying, is he was like, I watched, and I totally agree with this point, I watched these 22-minute commercials as a kid because I loved seeing toys in animated form going on adventures to inspire me to do things.
Exactly.
So it's like, while adults were like, oh my God, this is bad for the kids, us kids were like, hell yeah. Sell us these toys because I want to watch animated versions of the toys that I'm about to go to the store and buy to inspire adventures.
Exactly.
It's like, that was totally fine for me. So like, I was well aware that I was watching commercials. Actually, some of the best part of watching the shows back then was for the commercials that would be in between, in the commercial breaks. It was like you're seeing, because toy commercials back then for action figure lines were really just like little mini 30-second exciting episodes for you, because it was like, you were like, oh my God, because there was toy lines that I had, and we'll get into this in future episodes, where I had recorded the toy commercials and had them on VHS tape and would watch them over and over again, because maybe there were some toys, figures or play sets in that toy line I didn't have. So I would watch those commercials over and over again to, I don't know, fantasize about having
quality marketing going on.
Totally, isn't it?
But here's the thing, like how I see it when I was a kid, Deke was wholesome.
Deke!
These
Which
cartoons.
Is a funny word to say. Deke was wholesome.
Yes, it is. But they were marketing to us kids, and they were marketing directly to us. And some people thought that was bad, and maybe it was. But they were adding value to our lives that allowed us to imagine and have these incredible adventures. So,
totally.
I don't think it was sinister.
No, I don't think so either. I think parents were just. It doesn't matter what generation you are, parents are always trying to find something to fucking cry about.
Yeah.
And that was the thing in 1985. It was, are your kids going to do the marijuanas, and are they being fucking sold toys too much?
Shit.
So as for a lot of the cartoons. Back then it was animated in Japan. So this one had a bunch of different studios that worked on it. Studio Juno, Studio World, KK Deke Asia, all and Ashi Productions. All kinds of different companies kind of came together which you would really probably have to pump out 75 episodes.
Yeah, dude, so much.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tell when you look at some of the reflective qualities on the masks
very
and
anime.
electricity, the mask
anime.
qualities.
And it's funny because back then I don't think even you yet at this time, like when we were 4 and 5 years old, had a frame of reference of Japanese animation. So we had no idea that all these shows were like had that anime quality. But then later in the 90s when we discovered anime, we're like, oh, I see the correlation between the things. So like I mentioned, this lasted 75 episodes spanning just 1 year until 1986 upon its cancellation. But the premise, like we went over before, led by Mac Tracker, who operated transforming armored vehicles in their ongoing battle against the criminal organization Venom, led by Miles Mayhem, a.k.a. Colonel Sanders. Colonel Sanders. That was also one thing, but then the real standout feature to this show and the toy line was an emphasis on super-powered masks that they would that would come over and give them some sort of like unique powers, which of course now as an adult and we see the marketing standpoint, that was of course like, hey, put on a mask and then your guy can do whatever you want him to do. The parents saw it as nefarious, but I see it as like you're inspiring your kid to use your imagination. Just get the mask on. What do you want him to do now?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have a lot of memory, much like Gordy, of the cartoon. I know I've saw it, but we watched the first episode to rekindle the love.
Yeah. I mean, there is one thing I remembered, like the second mask. Like as soon as we started talking about it, that popped into my head. So,
but when we were watching a cartoon and they're all sitting around and the masks came down, spinning down, it like flooded my mind with nostalgia. I was like, I remember watching this for sure.
Yeah.
The toys were really kind of the meat and potatoes of this. The toy line was much more successful than the cartoon. The M.A.S.K toy line ran from 1985 to 1988, releasing 4 official series and waves through those years. Each series featured a group of common vehicles with the ability to transform into armored combat vehicles, and most vehicles came with 1 or 2 drivers, each driver, of course, having a mask. Now, the toys and figures were in a 2-inch scale, which...
Weird, right?
It's weird. Not uncommon. Now, of course, 3 3/4 inch scale was really kind of the norm at this time, with a lot of toy lines taking on the 3 3/4 inch scale brought upon by G.I. Joe and Star Wars. There were tons of lines that had the 3 3/4 inch scale. Of course, it was also not super commonplace because we also had 5-inch scale and like He-Man and Thundercats and all these different scales were crazy, but there wasn't a ton of toys that had in the 2-inch scale,
especially with articulation. So
with articulation, these had 7 points of articulation. So you had a head, you had swivel arms, you had legs and knees. Which was cool. But I loved the 2-inch toy line. Now, there is another toy line that we'll do a future episode on that we haven't done it yet because I'm so passionate about it. It's going to be a very long episode.
Yes.
Dino Riders was also a 2-inch scale.
Ooh.
The benefit to the 2-inch scale is price points, really. They put them in a 2-inch scale because you had all these huge vehicles. You had playsets like Boulder Hill, which was a huge gas station built into this mountain.
Boulder Hill
Turned into a fortress.
Massive.
Now, if these were in a 3 4/4 inch scale or even a 5-inch scale, these playsets would be massive.
Yeah.
And of course, then parents wouldn't be able to afford them. Thus, sales wouldn't be very big. However, I feel like they did a very, very good job with the detail in such a small scale. Cars had real rubber tires, and on the tires were their official Goodyear tires.
Goodyear,
cool. A lot of the vehicles had working seatbelts, so you could strap your guys in. We had chrome, we had undercarriage details, all kinds of stuff. The masks, however, were very small in the first initial outing of M.A.S.K figures. The masks, put them on your figures. But in that 2-inch scale, they were very easy to get lost in the midst of all your stuff.
Yes.
Snuggles would eat them probably.
Freaking Snuggles.
Fucking Snuggles. So kids and parents alike would get frustrated by this, forcing Kenner to retool the size of the masks in later editions of the waves, where they became a little bit bigger and bulkier with chest attachments. Probably primarily whenever you look at mask stuff, you'll see the bigger masks with the chest pieces that click on. Because I think it was real short-lived when it was just the masks on the head. So if you find the smaller masks, it's much more rare.
Man, I wonder. So I had Matt Tracker with the hot rod, is what I call it, because it reminds me of the Transformer. But I wonder what size mask I had. I have no idea. First wave or later?
If you got it in 1985,
yeah,
I suspect you probably snagged it with the small mask, because it wasn't until later when people, after the line was established, people were losing the accessories. They were like, "This sucks," and then Kenner was like, "All right, well, let's retool the masks for newer editions." So if you got on the line right when it first came out, you probably had the small mask.
Wow.
I mean, it's probably in that red little bucket you used to have.
Actually, I don't even know if it was mine or my brother's, but I certainly played with it.
Well, you were 4 when M.A.S.K launched, so I don't know if that's like an age
appropriate toy. Yeah.
What kind of toys you want to buy.
Oh, yeah, gotcha.
So, especially, I don't know, choking hazards were a thing, but back in the 80s, parents gave no fucks.
No.
It was like, you go out, play, do what you got to do.
Yep.
Just come back by 8 p.m. for dinner.
Yep. Here's the keys to the car. Here's a shotgun.
Here's some meth. It's a new thing. Meth will be popular in the 2000s.
Yeah.
So, yeah, when that came out, you were 4 and I was 3-ish.
Yeah.
I was 3-ish. So I probably didn't get into M.A.S.K till like 86, 87 in the later lines. So I probably never had the small heads.
Yeah.
Or the small masks. Most vehicles featured some sort of spring-loaded auto transformation with the ability to transform into armored combat vehicles, supplemented by manually positioned parts. Despite not using die-cast metal, the toys were built of high-quality, detailed, using user-applied stickers, paint, chrome, rubber tires, like we mentioned. Some vehicles and tires were even licensed, and the vehicles look like real vehicles. Of course,
they were quality.
They were super quality.
When we reviewed like the commercials for this, I was surprised. I remember them, but man, they were quality toys. At least that first line was super.
They were
quality.
Awesome. Yeah, because then of course, like we mentioned, they had 4 different lines, and then they kind of started to lose their way, I feel.
Yeah.
As mentioned, each vehicle included a pilot figure with a removable science fiction mask, etc. The windowless, they came in these cool windowless boxes. And that's one thing I remember the most, is going to the stores, seeing these awesome boxes on the shelf and being like, oh, fuck yeah. That's so dope.
Yeah.
Because there was something that I feel like is a lost art to toys these days, is toy packaging. It's not as, I don't know, enticing and cool as it once was.
Just look at a carded G.I. Joe figure.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh man,
yeah, perfect.
It's perfect. But of course, as the day and age that we live in, toys are of course now more marketed to 30-year-olds, to collectors, whereas kids aren't really playing with toys a whole lot. So packaging now is starting to shift into a cool, more retro packaging to appeal to us, those of us that have the memories. Like I was at Target the other day, and they had the NECA version, NECA Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street figures, which I have a couple of that I bought a ways back. But now the newer packaging is box figures that had opening windows, but the boxes are the horror movie posters, all littered and worn. Looks like 80s. It's very cool. I love packaging. I think packaging is one of the coolest things about older toys and collecting. That's why now in my older age, when I'm buying toys from when I was a kid, I want them in packages. You can see on this wall over here, like the Battle Beast package. Look at that fucking Food Fighters package. They're just it's just an art form all on its own that I feel like has been lost. You can't see it, or if you're listening, you definitely can't see it. But over to the left here is my wall of toys here. A lot of stuff is from the 80s there. We got Beetlejuice, Supernaturals, Madballs, Food Fighters, Ninja Turtles, Battle Beasts, Captain Power, Monster in My Pocket, which is 90s. But they're all very appealing. If you were to be a kid to walk through the toy shelves and see those and see M.A.S.K along in there, you would just be like, I need everything. And I think that M.A.S.K really definitely sold itself.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So of course late in the first series, or perhaps in the second, the first wave main character figures were also sold in 2-packs on blister cards with their masks, much like you'll see there, like Battle Beasts. This is not uncommon for the 2-inch scale line of figures. Dino Riders also did this, because much like Dino Riders, masks, you had to buy the play sets to get the figures. And I don't remember really what price points were back then, but eventually, of course, down the road, kids also wanted figures, so they released 2-packs, just like Dino Riders did. And then of course, where am I at? Then later on, so they had the 2-packs and the blister packs with the mask. Then they had unique versions of the characters, quote unquote, available on carded adventure pack sets with transformable figure accessories. So one of them I was mentioning to you had the kid with like the R2D2 C-3PO ripoff guy. I can't think of the name. T-Bob's.
Yeah.
So that was like one of the adventure pack assortments. So the first 2 series featured an assortment of different types of vehicles, mostly based on the normal vehicles on the road at the time. This would basically be your standards. You had the semi-truck, you had the car that turned into a helicopter and stuff like that. These were all just regular stuff. That was the first series 1 and series 2. Then the third series focused on the line like you were talking about earlier, that was like racing and stunt themes, with the vehicles disguise modes being various race cars, transporters, and stunt vehicles. I think that's kind of where
after that it kind of,
and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. So that was the third series. Then the fourth series went a step further in engineering and science fiction with split seconds. This was each vehicle divided into 2 independent vehicles for its battle mode. The second vehicle was piloted by a translucent plastic hologram figure version of the driver. So you get 2 different figures. One was like, you know how they had like mail away figures you could get. They were like translucent. This is what the
elusive mail
This
away.
was like their last ditch attempt to try to capitalize on sales. Now, I was doing a lot of research on Transformerland.com. I had a lot of great information on M.A.S.K, and they say here, quote, despite its massive initial success, domestic interest in M.A.S.K waned during the third series. By the split second series, the toys became quite scarce in the U.S., and as with many toy lines, the last series eventually found its way over to Europe, where the toy line endured a little bit stronger before finally dying off completely in 1988.
R.I.P.
And that was M.A.S.K from 1986 to 88 with the cartoon and the toy line.
Yeah.
Of course, there were other instances in media. So what was cool is when you bought a M.A.S.K toy in the box, the first M.A.S.K comic, it would come with a comic. The first M.A.S.K comics were 3 mini comics produced by Kenner that were packaged with the vehicles in the first series, 1985. After the success of the franchise, DC Comics picked up the rights and produced a special insert, which appeared in several comic books dated September to November 1985, to launch a 4-issue miniseries. This was soon followed by another insert in comics dated from June to November 1986, and a regular series that only lasted 9 issues, going from February to October 1987. Did you ever read any of these comics?
I don't know, honestly. I was young. They were floating around in the 80s. I remember the cover of them, but that's it. But I can honestly say I love the trio of the 80s trio of marketing to kids. I love it. I think He-Man started it, but we got we got the toy.
Well, that's the thing.
Then we got the comic book. And then we got the cartoon. Exactly. It's beautiful.
Well, that's the thing with He-Man that you're mentioning is when they had the toy, he just pulled it out of his ass. He was like, well, we got to have something. He's like, oh, we're doing a comic book, even though. And then so they had to whip out a comic book, which ended up being really cool. And then the show spawned off of all that. You're right. The trifecta of geek shit was
awesome.
Really kind of what shaped us as people. So, of course, all those things kind of died out when M.A.S.K died out. The comics were short-lived. However, fast forward to current day and age, where people that played with M.A.S.K as kids are now adults. M.A.S.K was represented at the 2011 New York Comic-Con by Hasbro, because Hasbro cannibalized Kenner some time ago, and now, of course, owns all those properties. And they're working towards some sort of shared universe where, like, M.A.S.K and G.I. Joe and all these other properties are in this one cohesive universe, because that's the thing to do now. Are cinematic and shared universes. Anyway, M.A.S.K was presented at the Comic-Con by Hasbro in a convention-exclusive one-shot comic titled Unit E. You understand what I'm saying there? Unit E.
Yes.
That featured various Hasbro licenses. So this was like combine of all of them. That comic was written by Andy Schmidt. M.A.S.K was repackaged there as a rogue quasi-law enforcement agency battling corruption in Detroit, led by Matt Tracker and 4 original team members, including a married couple. That's taken from Wikipedia. So, which I think is interesting how, of course, they shape it to be more modern enforcement agency battling corruption in Detroit. Because if you think about the 80s, like, it was essentially kind of a G.I. Joe ripoff.
Yeah.
with Venom.
With,
Cobra.
yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
in the fucking discount
Discount villains, man.
Cobra Commander.
Yeah.
So it's of course you had to evolve that. And then of 2016, the franchise was reintroduced as part of IDW's Revolution crossover series with writing by Brandon Easton, artwork by Tony Vargas. Matt Tracker has now shifted in gender, race.
Whoa.
It's Martha Tracker. Matt Tracker has now been depicted as an African American in the series. Easton described the character as, quote, an engineering genius and an intellectual bad boy who's been in this search of stability since the loss of his father at an early age. Now Matt Tracker has some depth to his humanity. M.A.S.K branched out into its own series in November 2016, but then was canceled by IDW after 10 issues, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Final issue came out August 23rd, 2017.
Yeah.
I have not, admittedly, read any of the newer M.A.S.K stuff.
I've not.
My last experience with M.A.S.K was in 1988.
Yeah, I do not remember these. I didn't even notice them. If I'd known more about, if they had been more vocal about this creation and the universe they were trying to create, maybe I would have noticed, but it went under my radar.
Totally. And what's weird is because I love IDW. IDW has resurrected Ninja Turtles. I think they were the ones that did the G.I. Joe comics. They really are like capitalizing on all the franchises that we grew up loving. So it's interesting to me that it went under my radar when they did the M.A.S.K series.
Yeah.
So I will be definitely going up and picking those over. So the series was canceled. The characters from Brandon Easton's version of the M.A.S.K returned later in 2017 as part of IDW's First Strike crossover series, featuring both a one-shot and a 6-issue miniseries. So with that 10-ish, so there's almost like 20 issues of comics that we should probably pick up and do some reading.
Yeah, we should take a look at those.
I
Definitely.
might check those out on Comixology, so just so I don't have to go to nerdy comic book stores and try to fucking
thumb through for
all
3
this
months.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know also, though, Gordy, that there's video games? I think you did.
I think I did.
Now, why don't you tell me about some video games?
Okay, so there's 3 video games beginning in 1987. British software house Gremlin Graphics, which that's a great name, Gremlin Graphics.
Oh, yeah.
Straight up.
Now, when did Gremlins come out?
The Gremlins movies?
It was 1985, I think.
Yeah, 85-ish.
Why don't I tell you?
Yeah, look that up.
I'm going to, because it just makes sense for...
Gremlins... So Gremlin Graphics released a trilogy of computer games based on the M.A.S.K franchise for various 8-bit computer formats. Do you remember these at all, or have you only seen these from current perspective?
Yeah, the first time I saw them was today.
Oh, okay.
But I did have a Commodore 64, which every time I see Commodore 64 footage of games, I'm like really impressed.
Yeah.
Because I remember the Commodore 64 being very like text-based adventures. My brother would play a bunch of text-based RPGs and shit on them.
Yeah.
So whenever I see games like we were watching, I was like, oh my God, that looks like a real
like a game.
title.
I'm like, what?
Yeah. No, I didn't have any of those. But there were 3 that came out on the Commodore 64.
Yeah. I don't know what other platforms. It's probably...
the Commodore 64 was the most notable of them. The other ones were kind of obscure platforms. Nothing very... Well, of course, Nintendo had just barely even surfaced at this time.
Yes.
So, there would be
new kids on the block, innovating their heads off.
Nice, yeah. Girl, don't leave.
So the first game was a vertically viewed 2D game. This is a top-down game. I don't remember this one, but we watched some footage of it, and it was pretty sweet because it showed the playset.
Yeah, it's got the Boulder Hill.
Yeah, right in the game. That's so cool.
It was actually cool. It was something that we probably would have had some fun playing.
Yes,
when we were
absolutely.
Kids. The controls, I imagine, were
pretty wonky.
Complex, probably.
They were wonk.
Yeah, so there was that. We got here. The premise of that game is Venom had propelled Boulder Hill into a time vortex, and the player must rescue the other members of M.A.S.K team by collecting and reassembling parts of a scan key, which then directs the players to a location of the missing personnel. At the time, the game was favorably reviewed, although noted by some that the tie into the franchise was quite tenuous, and only the graphics rather than the storyline gameplay connected to the M.A.S.K franchise.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a weird premise for a game anyway.
That's a staple of private or IPs to video games. It's tenuous is the word to describe all of them.
All of those games from the 80s that were like on NES, Commodore 64, that were licensed games. We're talking Ghostbusters, E.T., Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, M.A.S.K, Monsters in My Pocket. All of these games had nothing to do with the IPs that they were tied to, other than characters being placed in there.
Yeah.
You were jumping over fucking floating doll head,
yeah,
just like all kinds of weird shit. Yeah, the games back then never made a lick of sense. It was like the Back to the Future games from LJN on
oh my
NES.
god,
Do you remember how bad those were?
Bad.
And how it like just had a passing resemblance to the actual films.
Yeah,
but it was the only thing we had, so we like fucking played the shit out of it.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
Yeah, those were bad. They were super bad.
Super.
Speaking of, if I can just side note, it would be really cool to have a next gen Back to the Future game. And I'm not talking the Telltale series that came out in like 2013. I'm talking like a full blown open world time traveling to, you'd have like this huge hill valley that you could like time travel and experience different times of.
Dude, you're talking my language. That would be amazing.
Yeah, it would be.
I'm on board.
That would be cool. So then they had the second game, which we didn't actually see footage of because the video we watched, the game crashed for him, right? But that was that was more traditional game.
Yeah, that was a side scroller. Shoot 'em up.
Which one of these do you remember the most? You have memory.
I don't remember the third. I think it's the second one, vaguely. My neighbor had a Commodore 64, and
what I think a better thing would be is what didn't that particular neighbor have? He had everything.
Know. Yeah, he had everything. Everybody had those kids.
I feel like he. It was like the only kid that for some reason had like a full-time job.
He could afford it all.
Yeah.
You had those kids, the neighbors that kid had everything. He had the Transformers or whatever, and you're always so jealous.
So that was your kid. That was your guy.
Yeah.
And I knew him too. I hung out with him, but not as much as you did. But my kid was Kelly Triptow. Who I grew up with, who I just went to school with, but I would always go over to his house after school. He had everything, dude. He had the giant T-Rex from Dino Riders. He had the fucking Ghostbusters Firehouse. He had all the things that I did not have. And I remember the one thing that he had that I wanted so badly was he had the Ghostbusters role-playing guns that shot the foam.
The pack.
And the packs.
Dude.
Yeah, and the packs. And I would go over and we'd like hunt ghosts in his basement, and I was like so jealous of the fact that he had that.
He had that. How do you become one of those kids?
Your dad like works for IBM or something.
Yes, yeah.
And that's it.
Well, mine did.
That's true. That is true.
But he had like 400 kids. So
that's right. Yeah. So and then of course they released the third game, the final game in the M.A.S.K trilogy, M.A.S.K 3: Venom Strikes Back, released in 1988, and it was a 2D horizontal shoot 'em up. Mm-hmm. That game, we watched some footage of that. That game looks hard as fuck.
Yeah, it looks really hard. These games were not balanced.
No, not at all. This was like the pinnacle of difficult side scrolling.
Yeah. Kids didn't beat that game. There isn't a kid out there.
Oh, there is. I'm sure of it. Maybe. Can imagine trying to play that kind of game, but on a keyboard.
Well, yeah, it would be. Yeah, dude, that'd be tough. Mm-hmm. I never adapted to the keyboard when I was a kid. The controller was like magic.
You merely adapted to the keyboard. I was bored into it. Yes, continue.
Oh, I was just saying that like the joypad. Atari was pretty good. All the controllers I did not like. I think it was ColecoVision with the wheel. None of those. The keyboard didn't adapt to.
What about the Sega Master
Nintendo
System with that fucking weird square? Oh god, rounded edge square D-pad.
That was terrible. Because
there was actually no such thing as a D-pad until the NES.
NES,
they pioneered
man.
The D-pad.
And the first time you put that in your hand, you're like 10 minutes into the game. You're like, this is life right here. Thank you, Nintendo.
And it's still life. It's completely.
Yeah.
Almost every game I am exclusively a D-pad, even if there's the option for the sticks.
Yeah.
Like fighting games, I'm like a D-pad player. Like it's just how I grew up. It's what's embroiled in my DNA. Yeah. I would not be able to pick up a Commodore 64 and then skillfully be able to play any of these games. I don't.
It would
have
be
keyboard.
tough.
And there was no keyboard and mouse. I don't think
it was just a keyboard.
It was just keyboard and keyboard.
They might have had some other peripherals. I don't remember any of them, but I'm sure they did.
And that was it.
Yeah.
After Mask 3 came out in 1988, the cartoon had been long dead from there. And by a couple of years, the toy line was dying out in Europe.
Yeah.
And then Mask was lost to the ages until its brief comic resurgence in 2011 through 2017. There's been talks of rebooting Mask in different ways. There's supposed to be a movie being developed by Hasbro, but that's kind of, I think, stuck in development hell. If it's anything like Battleship movie they did, it's probably better off.
Probably better off in our memories.
Yeah, totally. Any final recap thoughts that you want to say on Mask?
I just want to say that I thought that those were really clever toys, man.
They were the best toys. Yeah. That's not true. They were good toys.
They were good toys. They were very clever, like transforming cars. They really were marketed to us as kids.
Absolutely. I mean, what cartoon wasn't really at the time? Another cool thing about Mask is because we were watching another just long dead thing is the public notices at the end. Of the episode. At the end of the first one, the fucking kid, the baseball light goes into the road. He picks it up, and then Matt Tracker's like, "Remember, kids, when playing in the street, look both ways."
Yes.
Like,
which that was a very common message.
It was totally common. Yeah. And why? You brought up a good point.
Well, I mean, they had to have those because the parents were out to frickin' shut this down. So, some of these studios...
You had to throw it in there to be like, no, see, we have educational stuff as well.
Yeah, and, because we're crazy kids out in the street frickin' all day. And
because back then, your kids would just be like, go outside, play, come back at 6 for dinner.
Yep.
It was like, watch out for cars.
Yeah.
Don't take drugs from strangers.
If you get in a fight, figure it out yourself. Yeah. If some adults mean to you, figure it out yourself.
Mm-hmm. And that's the way it was. Man, kids today. I feel like an old piece of shit because I'm like, kids today.
Get off my lawn.
Bunch of fucking slobs.
Yeah.
But really, man, all you had to worry about back then was not getting hit by cars. Car.
Yeah.
And, not getting kidnapped. And even though you're right, the crime rate was much higher then, it was much less scary to be a kid.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, don't take drugs, don't get hit by cars. Now it's like, watch out for bullets. They're going to strike you from any which direction.
Just like the news is overwhelming. So,
it's crazy. Guys, if you are watching this as a video version of the show on our YouTube channel, Paper or Plastic, check out the subscribe button. It's there. It's just popping over to you. It's like wom, wom, wom. Click it. Click the bell so you know when new shit's popping. And if you're listening to this as an audio version of the podcast, well, rate it. Give it some stars. Give it some positive reviews. You're like, I like these guys. They're cool. They have cool voices. They talk about shit that's fun. If you want to see better produced versions of these shows and you have the ability to support the shows even further, check us out on patreon.com/R24 so you can be cool. Oh, by the way, Gremlins came out in 1984.
Oh, geez.
Circling back to that.
Perfect.
But if you want to be cool, much like our good friend Ego Trip, Creepy Buddy.
Oh, yeah.
He's cool as fuck.
Quality human being.
He's a quality human being. You can be quality human being like Stephanie Chappell, or like Diabeto63, or Muffled Scream, or even Joe Moyer, the Wrong Channel Joe, with his excellent YouTube channel and his streams, or the bearded Eli Smith, Osama. If you want to be cool like them, and you want maybe possible one and only access to those commentaries we're going to work on doing.
Yeah.
Patreon.com/R24Media. Nope.
Oh, wait, no.
Patreon.com/R24.
R224.
He doesn't know. That's it, guys. We're out. Gordy?
Yeah.
Say mask.
Mask.
Sharona. Ma. There's so many songs that have done the ma.
You're right. That's weird.